Hey guys, the last part of the review guide. Um, so we're going to start right now on page 29. And what we're looking for is we're going to talk about linear and exponential regression. So kind of like it says in the directions at the top, you want to go to the stat button. You want to input the table and edit section. So you want to put those in L1 and L2, the ones that got 2 rows or columns. And then it'll say in the question, linear or exponential. And in most cases, sometimes it might ask which one's better, which means you'd have to do both. But let's look at one of the questions. We're going to look at this one here, the one that says write a linear regression. So you don't really need to guess on which one you need to use. You just need to read the question over and you'll be good to go. So let me put this here. So you're going to want to go to stat. Press the stat key. Okay. And then hit edit. And then we got -1 through 5. Okay, which is 7 numbers. And then I'm going to put the other numbers in. So we got 4, 9, 12, 15.5, 18, 21, 24. So, one thing you want to make sure you do also, they'll ask about correlation coefficient. So, if you haven't yet, if you go to mode and go all the way down, there'll be a section that is labeled Stat Diagnostics. You want that switched on. That'll give you R, the correlation coefficient, which they use. But if it's the Regents, this is already pre-programmed on there. And if you don't see it on the Regents, then ask someone to reset the calculator for you, because that can be reset without any issues. So, first thing we're going to do, like I said, we put our numbers in. We're going to go back to calc. It says linear regression, so that's choice 4. It's got our lists in there already, so we go to calculate. Now, in most cases, they're going to tell you to round to something. So in this case, it says nearest hundredth. It's a good idea to write down what you get for the A and B values in case you round it wrong, because you can still get partial credit. So in this case, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to write out my equation. I'm going to write out what A and B are. So we got 3.21428.5, and then B is 8.357142. So now I'm going to write the equation out, and I'm going to write it with those answers rounded to the nearest hundredth. So this is going to be in y equals 3.21x plus 8.36. So the 5 changes to a 6 because of the 7 past it, and that 1 stays a 1 because there's a 4 past it. Now it says, what would the predicted y value be when x is 10? So we're going to use that equation. We're going to plug in 10, and then you can type that part in the calculation section of the calculator to get an answer. The other thing you want to pay attention to, which is correlation coefficient. Notice how that's really close to 1. That's a strong positive relationship. So you could see positive or negative depending on the direction of the graph. And the closer it is to 1 or -1, the stronger the relationship is. So this is a pretty strong relationship, which means that pretty much all these points end up looking like a straight line. Okay. So we're going to move on from there, and we're going to look at the next section, which again is talking about part of the stat section. You'll see at the top of that page, central tendency and variation, you'll see some of the measures that we've talked about in class. And again, this is stat section, but you want to use, for these, you want to use the one variable stats, which is choice number 1 in the calc section. And some of the things that you'll see is for the mean abbreviation is X bar, median is MED, and then the range and interquartile ranges are based on the 5-number summary at the bottom. So with mode, you can't find that. You have to go through the list and just see which one happens the most. So like if you're looking at the example below, the list below, Like that list has 3, 5, so that would be the mode. But that's the one we really have to do the most, and that one's probably the easiest to do. So, gonna move on right now. Okay. You'll see that in a couple of the questions it talks about standard deviation. So these are separate lists. You want to do each one separately. But if you're looking for the standard deviation looks like a O with a little tail on it. So that's the standard deviation that you're looking for. And they want you to, for this one, do comparisons of the mean and the standard deviation. So you want to write those down for each team. And then from there, you can go ahead and see which one is true based on the less than or greater than signs that you see in the question. So a lot of the same when you're talking about a box plot. Okay, but we'll label this one together. So each of these values, minimum, maximum, are the ends, which would sometimes we call them the whiskers, or in the box plot. You got Q1, first quartile, Q3, and then your median is in the middle. And sometimes they might use the word Q2, because again, it's the second quarter. But they use those quartiles in the case of questions like this because what's happening is you have 25% of the numbers in each section. So every section has 25% of all the data. So if there was 100 numbers in your box and whisker plot, that would mean there'd be 25 numbers in between those two lines. So it really shows the spread of the data. Now the last part that I wanted to look at talks about sequences. Now with sequences, there's two types. There's what's called a recursive sequence, which we'll look at an example of, and explicit, which is basically similar to a function. So if you look at like this first question right here, there's a pattern forming with a number of blocks, how it's changing. And what you're trying to do is figure out which of these three represents that. So like for example, if I'm looking at rule 3 right here, it says a of n equals 4 times n minus 2. Well, the n in this case represents, like it says in the question, the nth term. So term 1 would go in for n. So in this case, it'd be 4 times 1 minus 2. And then if we look at a recursive sequence, 2 is an example of recursive because it gives you the first value, and then there's a rule to get the next one. So like this rule right here states, to get the next value, I got to take the last one before it, this is the last one, and add 4 to it. So the best way to do this is showing the substitution. And the last one we're going to look at for this is down at the bottom. It's talking about defining a recursive function. So in the case of, let's say the first one here, which they want us to call B, first thing you want to do is you want to label the first term. In this case it's 10. And then the next part of the rule is to state how it's changing. So the next number would be based on the last number that we just had. And then you'll see there's a change from one number to the next. And that change is constant. So we're going to be adding 2 to it. Okay. Now you could see these with multiplication, division, addition, or subtraction, but you really want to focus on what the changes from one term to the next, kind of like we talked about with linear and exponential functions earlier. Okay, so I hope that helped, and let us know if you need any help in class.